Welcome back to another Spirit Island video. In this video, we're going to be continuing my Memory Intensify guide, this time talking about my final tips. Tip number 1, your starting land is either sands or mountain. Your starting terrain type may change based on your starting board. So here I have board D, and my highest number land is a mountain, so that is the land I'm going to start in. Now there are going to be some boards, like board C. Well, actually, board C, you also start in a mountain. Let me find another one here. The board A is an example where my highest numbered land is going to be a sands. So in this case, I would start in a sands. Tip number 2, you can self-cast elemental teachings on yourself to grant 3 permanent elements. This, plus your free any, will give you a total of 4 elements a turn to threshold majors. And I definitely recommend looking at video 2 to see this. But essentially, we're going to be using elemental teachings to give us 3 markers or 3 elements, plus or any. And then you're going to have a major, and you're going to reclaim loop this every turn. And because you have your 3 energy or 4 energy from top track, you can easily do that and threshold a lot of majors. So this is something that is very critical to playing this spirit effectively. Tip number 3. So speaking of the elemental markers, I have, I guess, a pseudo tier list for those markers. And when I say tier list, I mean the markers that I find to be most impactful or most useful. And the first one is going to be that earth marker. So the earth marker allowing you to enhance any defense, but most importantly, enhancing your left defense. This is very, very important. So you can never go wrong with blindly getting an earth. Next, I would put an air as like my number 2. I always like to have at least 1 air, but I wouldn't spam air in my marker pool. I want there to be at least 1 air, allowing me to make some of those miners fast. The next one, I would put water, as water allows me to gather extra Dahan with Share Secrets, and it's just a very flexible marker to pick from. After water, I like doing fire or animal, and I like doing animal because being able to add extra disease is just pretty busted on minors, majors, all of that. And then the fire tends to be very flexible as I can increase damage. After that, I would go with a sun and then plants. Being able to add extra strife or badlands is nice, and then or extra wilds for the plants. And then the very last marker I would do would be moon. And moon can be very helpful. It's just it's very rare that it's used. In the minor deck, you can use the moon markers for blight healing effects, or called the Dahan ways, and then there's like 1 or 2 majors where the moon is useful. A lot of times, yeah, this moon, you don't really pick it. So this is my rough draft, my rough tier list. Pretty much you can't go wrong getting earth or water. Those are always very useful. You always want at least 1 air, and then the animal and fire tend to be very strong markers. Number 4. Earth markers can amplify your defend 3 to defend 5, and that's something that I've already covered. Water markers can allow you to gather extra Dahan with Share Secrets. And air markers can make minors slow to fast, but not majors. So that's something to keep in mind. Remember, you're allowed to spend 1 marker each per action. So if you want, you can spend a fire, sun, earth, all for a single card. But remember that card has to have those effects. So you can't spend an earth marker to give the card a defend 2. It already has to have that effect, and you can't spend 2 of the same marker. Tip number 5. When growing on your board, you want to grow in a way such that you're able to reach all of the lands with only 2 sacred sites. So a good example would be over here on board C, where I start in C7. So I would like to grow into my C2, because now I have access to my whole board with just 2 sacred sites. Now, this isn't always the case, but keep this in mind. If you decide to instead grow into C3, then that means your next sacred site that you create will have to be over here in C1, or I guess in one of these lands. Basically, you need to get access to that C1 somehow. So keep that in mind when you're growing on your own board. Tip number 6. G4 isn't completely useless, but it's rarely taken. The final tier of your left innate is rarely hit, so do not prioritize this. So this is your G4. That is your 9 energy button. it is it's a great way to pay for those crazy expensive majors, and sometimes it is useful, but it's not something that I would be choosing very often. The 2 energy plus growing on your tracks is just usually gets the job done. And the main reason why you always want to be growing is because you want to access that 3 plays as well as the 3 energy and free markers every turn. There are times where that 9 energy can come and play a role. Good examples would be like Cast Down, or maybe you're trying to play like Consuming Void, stuff like that. I also mentioned the last tier of your left innate, that's the Defend. It's going to cost 2 Moon, 3 Air, and 4 Earth, and this will give you Defend 2 per card in the Invader discard pile. So by the time this is more valuable than your Defend 3, you need to have at least 2 cards in the discard pile. But really, because it's so elemental intense, you really will never hit this. You need at least 3 plays for this for Intensify to hit it, and you need 3 plays. All of those plays would need to have air and earth to be able to hit this innate, or you'd have to self-cast elemental teachings. But I think if you're going to be self-casting teachings to hit this innate, then I think you're either so far ahead or you're very, very desperate. Tip number 7. While I push for a 3-2 build with the Spirit, that means going to 3 energy in 2 plays, it's not unheard of to go 1 energy and 3 plays while slinging support minors like Gift of Constancy. So what I'm saying is while I say that going to the 3-2 tends to be the most favorable build or very standardized, there are some builds where you can go 1 energy and then go rush down the place track if you're drafting very powerful 0 cost minors. Like if you can pick up Living Energy or Gifted Constancy or Portents, like these very powerful 0 cost cards, you can go down bottom track and have a very successful game on playing that way. Tip number 8. Share Secrets is able to protect Dahan in Ravages, but can also protect them against or for events. So remember those horrible disease events? Well, Share Secrets can keep them alive. And remember, you do have that air threshold. If you hit it, then you'll be able to gather Dahan as well as protect them. It also is important to point out is that sacred site really warps where your starting sacred sites are going to be. So because I have that sacred site over here on D8, if I'm playing this on turn 1, I'm going to be very limited to where I can gather Dahan. Tip number 9. Your first special rule, the Long Ages of Knowledge, allows you to forget power cards from your hand, or allows you to discard cards from your hand when you should be forgetting it. And I'm mentioning this here because you can do that for majors, as well as whenever you need to pay for specific events, such as those payment events that require you to discard or forget for those events. If I can actually find one, of course I find sacred sites, and we don't have any fire, so that's one. So here's one, for instance, Rising Interest, where I can forget teachings, and instead of forgetting it, it discards, and I get the 4 air that I need. And actually, Rising Interest is one of the events that memory can just easily pay for, as we can forget one of our cards, we can discard multiple cards, we tend to have tons of drafts. So this is a card that we can easily pay for the team. Tip number 10. Your right innate allows you to get up to 3 markers when you max it out. One of the things that I'll like to do with this innate is I will set it up in a land that I'm going to plan to defend and counterattack with Dahan. So maybe what I'll do, here's an example, is maybe my Sands is ravaging, and I need to get more Dahan in there. So I'll use my left innate to give me a nice defend 5 there. Of course, I'd play another card. I have that defend 5. I then would use the right innate there. I would then use Share Secrets to gather Dahan such that I can get a counterattack. That's going to give me a marker. I then am going to get another marker when it ravages. So it's a very easy way for you to get 2 markers because there's 2 actions occurring in that land. And so that is tip 10. In addition, this is a This is an action where you really want to pay attention on the board, and you want to think about those events that can give you the maximum of those three markers. And one thing to keep in mind, this is going to give you +3 markers a turn. You have +1 markers on your tracks. This is a total of 4 markers a turn. And if you have to pay 2 markers to get the extra card play, you're only going to have 2 markers to spend on your innate or your majors or your cards, stuff like that. So keep that in mind. Of course, you're not always going to be discarding markers to get the extra play, and you might not be always spending markers to amplify your effects, but knowing this math could be pretty important. If you like this video, like, subscribe for more content. I'll see you guys in the next video.